Steve, I mean, some people say we saw this coming. The car industry has said we just want to know what is coming. Do you think this has been the right move by Sunak?
Well, if he wants to get elected, it's certainly the right move. I mean, can we call it the Uxbridge effect? We found out, didn't we, that if you appeal to the motorist, if you seem to be on the side of the motorist, and when the media talk about the motorist, they sometimes make it seem like it's some weirdo sect sat there in string-back driving gloves reading their copy of the autocar and making brum-brum noises. Most of us are motorists, and most of us are sick of having this increasing burden put on us and being told what to do. We've got to transition to electric cars, whether we like it or not. But politicians have discovered that if you get on the side of the motorist, you've got a much better chance of holding on to power.
But I mean, he said there in his speech, didn't he, that it's not going to ban the sale of second-hand cars. It's just if you wanted to buy a new one. So surely this affects the industry more than anything. And you've got some saying, BMW, this isn't going to change our plans. Ford, however, saying, well, come on, make your mind up. We need to plan what we're doing. We need to plan what's coming off the production line.
It's outrageous. How dare he wake up and on a whim, which he can do, which is why he did it, say, never mind that directive saying that on pain of death, you had to stop making diesel and electric cars by 2030. Never mind, not the millions, not the tens of millions, but the hundreds of millions of pounds that have to be invested, billions around the world, of course, to make that transition from internal combustion, which we've relied on for 130 years now to move our cars. You've got to go electric. They've had to plan, the car industry has had to plan for 2030. And now all of a sudden, the government's turning around and saying, I tell you what, we'll step in line with everybody else and make it 2035.
I mean, do you think the entire programme to be net zero by 2050? I mean, sitting here now, that feels quite a long way off. But in reality, it's pretty soon, isn't it? Do you think any of this is achievable?
Well, who cares what I think? What do I know? I'll tell you what, the only thing I know about my gas boiler is it's problematic. And if it keeps going on the blink, and I only got it 3 years ago, if they came up with a better alternative, I, for one, would want to go for it. But people automatically assume that a petrol head like me is against the move to electric cars. I'm not. I think internal combustion is a 19th century technology. It is. It's not from the last century. It's from the century before that. Perhaps it's time we moved on. But if governments want industry to take them seriously, if they set targets, they have to stick with them, because governments aren't the ones who have to make this massive investment and then have to deal with the consequences of governments changing their minds.
Now, my understanding, Steve, is you think the government are potentially looking under all the wrong rocks to find their carbon reductions and could be considering instead something like synthetic fuels, which would potentially work with the combustion engines we already have, and are suggesting that perhaps the motor industry is having its CD moment.
The problem with saying to them, why don't we try and make the best of what we've got now? Why don't we run the cars we have now on synthetic fuels, which would have, far less of an effect on climate change from the science that I've seen? Not that I really understand it. I was much more of an arts bloke back in school, as most journalists were. But yet, there's no money in it. The transition to electric cars is potentially a massive money spinner for the car industry. I don't think you're old enough to remember when we went from vinyl to CD, but that was an enormous money earner. I mean, I remember paying $14.99 for the first CD I bought, which was like 2 or 3 times as much as a vinyl record. This is the motor industry's CD moment. This is a great opportunity for them to say, hey, would you like to embrace this new technology that's going to save the planet? Oh, by the way, it's quite a bit more expensive than the last stuff, but hey, come on, let's get on board the climate change eco-bus together and all go forward to this bright, clean air future, whilst making a lot of money. However, if the British government keeps changing its mind, then those car makers who choose to make cars in Britain now and invest in Britain now might just think that places who stick to what they've said, like Europe, is a better place to make their cars.